Hello everyone. So in this video today we're going to be looking at creating an effective setting for our narrative question. Now on the GCSE that will look either like you'll get a picture to describe, which you'll have to use the same sort of skills, or you'll get a stimulus, you'll get a picture of a setting already and you'll have to use your skills to describe that. But today we're going to be thinking about how to create an effective setting. And an effective setting can do many things. It can make the reader feel a certain way. It can give the reader clues as to what is going to happen for the rest of the story. We know things like pathetic fallacy, which we're going to write down in a second. So how we're going to start doing that, we're going to think really about creating a success criteria for what is going to make an effective setting. So let's go through a few ideas. So I mentioned pathetic fallacy. A great idea is to start with the weather, if you start with a thunderstorm, you know it's going to be a gloomy, quite mysterious or quite frightening story. Whereas if you start with bright sunshine, the tone is going to be different. It's going to feel different to the reader. So we can include pathetic fallacy, write that down in our success criteria. Obviously our vocabulary is going to be different. It's going to be varied and ambitious, so keep a thesaurus to hand. Structurally, you might return to the same setting. It might be about a haunted house and you might return to that same house at the end of the story to give the reader a sense of completion and coming full circle. What else do we need in there? I was going to say you tell me, but it doesn't really work like that on a video. So we've got pathetic fallacy, we've got different vocabulary, we've got structure. I think as well we need to be clear with our descriptions. We also need to be making sure that it's convincing based on the mark scheme. That it's compelling is a word that they use on GCSE, a compelling setting. So let's try and think of something different. We were doing the character one last week, and we thought about giving every character a weakness or something that makes them a little bit different. So let's try and make a setting a little bit different. If it's a haunted house, the reader is going to expect it to look a certain way. So why not change that? Why not give it something else? Maybe it looks like a haunted house on the outside, but actually it's this beautiful Instagram-worthy palace inside. Let's try and think of something that's going to make our setting stand out, because setting, if it's done right, can become the most important character in the story. Stephen King does this in The Shining with the Overlook Hotel. Or is it the Overwatch Hotel, or is that a computer game? I can't remember. But the hotel is an integral character to the story. In The Catcher in the Rye, New York City itself is a very important character in the story. And in Lord of the Flies, the desert island is arguably the most important character as well. So if you can create an effective setting, you are creating a new character, you are creating something for your characters to live within. So we're going to look at some examples in a second. Let's have a look at them now. Okay, so for the second part of this story, we're going to be looking, I'm going to be sharing my screen with you there a little bit so you can have a look at that. If you want to pause the video on this point and have a look at the actual mark scheme for the GCSE, then it's right there ahead of you. And you can add some of that to your success criteria that we went through in the first part. Now I want to read this. This is setting used for effect. And I think if we look at the setting here being used for effect, we can sort of see how it sets the rest of the story up. So let me read through this. The air was not peaceful on the 14th of April. The renewed April showers had been replaced with colossal winds, able to knock the largest of men off their feet, and sweeping gargantuan waves colliding harshly with the weary metal structures of passing trains, dangerously close to the coast. Ooh, I like that, a bit poetic, close to the coast. You see how the vocabulary there is effective, and we've moved on to another paragraph. We are now going to focus on the weather. Although this weather had come to be expected in the deep southwest of Cornwall, the tenacious nature of it was unmatched. It was as if all the weather in England had been focused onto one point in a ruthless attack against humanity from the blackened clouds above. So again, we've got this ominous tone being created here, and that is the effect of this setting. We've not even been introduced to a character yet, but we know the sort of story that this is going to be. A single train still running, typically British, ignorant to the danger that it was in. Its cold, rusted casing creaked against the wind and was assaulted by barrages of icy salt water. The once reassuring sound of the solid wheels clanking along the railway was now but a far-off memory to the train's few passengers, instead of being replaced by the constant onslaught of the elements. That's a great bit of vocabulary there. The personification as well, which we can add to our success criteria. The onslaught of the elements, so that the elements are attacking the train purposefully. The light was dim on board, and on board the tired train. the illuminating lights in the carriages, having been drenched in seawater, were no longer operational. All that was left was the bleak, unnatural light distorted through the cascading waterfalls on the windows. So we think about setting being used for effect there. We've got many different effects. We've got personification, we've got all of these different sort of what we call ASMAPs, these descriptive techniques used to create an effective scene. And we know before we're even introduced to a character that it's going to be this kind of gloomy, quite tense setting for a story. And the setting there almost becomes a character. So that's our first example. Now we're going to look at a stimulus, and imagine that this was our question that we've been given on our paper, on our GCSE paper. So we've got a haunted house there. What I would like you to do really quickly is to pause the video, having a look at this picture, and then try and pick out and plan anything that you think is important and anything that you think you could really, really focus on. It's an unusual building and it's quite gloomy. It's actually, to give you a clue, the house from the early 90s movie Casper the Friendly Ghost, because that is a film that I remembered. I remember the house very visually. So have a look at that, pause it for a couple of minutes, and try and plan what you would focus on in your description of the setting of this house. Okay, pause it, off you go. Right, so now you've looked at that house from Casper the Friendly Ghost, and we've hopefully picked some things out. So the things I picked out in that, we've got the gargoyles, which are these kind of the creatures, or they look like creatures, the big stone statues that are on the parapets and the turrets of this house. It looks old and decrepit. It looks like it's in a bad way. It doesn't look like a particularly nice house to live in. And I think that could be used to create a very, very certain tone and a very, I guess, a nice introduction to a story. If we were given that on GCSE, that would be a lovely, lovely picture to get. And I'm going to read through the example one last time, just to show you sort of what I would have written for that, and hopefully you've got your success criteria from the first part of the video. You've done a little plan, and then you've got this model to look at that we've looked at before. We're going to look at one final model, and actually I'm probably just going to do this instead of doing a little cut. That'll save Miss Big a little bit of editing there. So hopefully you can see this and not the rest of my messy living room. A beaten, cracked, mouldy pathway crunched beneath John's feet. Looking up, he noticed the ancient house guarded by eroding golems which seemed to stare at whoever or whatever got close, as if to say, "Come closer, I dare you." Rain trickled down John's face as he peered into the misty windows of the mansion, which at one time must have been taken care of very well, because you could still see the vague outline of where the now withering flower beds and bushes used to be trimmed. There you go. So that's the first part of that. Obviously, if you want to pause the video and have a look at the rest of that model, then great. But think about the parts that I've focused on. I'm imagining myself as like a movie director. I'm focusing on certain parts of the house that are of interest, and I'm personifying them. I'm using the best adjectives I can. I'm trying to make the setting itself seem like a character in the story. And I'm treating it as such. I'm treating it as an important part of the story, because it is one of the most important parts of the story. So please remember setting. Please remember to start with the setting, I think, especially for today's exercise. And if you want to, in the ending, come back to the same setting, or you want to change that, or change the reader's expectations, then that's fantastic as well. But please bear in mind the success criteria, the mark scheme that we've looked at, and try and remember that practice makes perfect, really, with writing. And also reading really, really helps with writing as well. You need to be reading, and you have got plenty of time, because we're all stuck at home as well. So I hope you're all well. I hope that was okay, and I hope that was useful, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. Okay, see you later.